Next, we will have a student board member update from Mr. Ian Hurd.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. First and foremost today, I wanted to highlight the incredible time I had with students from around the county at the inaugural Student Member of the Board's Advisory Council meeting. I wanted to thank our principals for advertising the council so well to their students. Now, more than ever, it's important that students continue to build community and address issues in their lives as they arise. I was thrilled with how thoughtful the discussions were and the transparency that my peers exhibited. As we approach our discussions on reopening, I am glad to have an overwhelming amount of student feedback, be it experiences, comments, or concerns. I feel the SMOB Advisory Council meeting was a great reminder for me on who I was sent here to serve and represent. There is nothing more motivating or empowering than seeing students impassioned in their element. With that in mind, I feel obligated today to bring to light a severe roadblock on my ability to accurately represent my peers and stay informed in the community. Since around early August, my school system email, studentboardmember@ccboe.com, has been blocked from receiving emails from the public. I originally believed this block to be an error, but I was notified today that it was intentional. I have been unable to hear from my constituents for nearly 190 days. I want to thank our new board chairman, Ms. Wilson, for getting staff to finally address this issue. But words cannot express how disheartened I am that a unilateral decision was made to block my email and thus silence the student voice without any notification. I received information today, 190 days after the ban, that a permission slip is needed for me to regain access to my email. This is a restriction none of my predecessors have had to face. I serve a 1-year term representing our amazing, diverse 27,000 students. For 52% of my term this year, I was inaccessible despite my email still being listed publicly on ccboe.com. A ban like this would never happen to any other member of this board, so it begs the question, why is it happening to the student member? On a positive note, I would like to bring a bill to the public's attention. House Bill 1060, Senate Bill 749 grants future student members on the Charles County Board of Education voting rights. This move is greatly needed to bring our board in line with other counties across the state. If passed, I am confident in the students who will succeed me to use their student perspective to make well-informed decisions in the boardroom. Finally, I wanted to thank Senator Ellis and Delegate Patterson for sponsoring the bill and valuing the student perspective. I am disappointed to see that the board did not include the student voices on committee's resolution in our meeting agenda for today. Despite this, I am excited for next month where a decision will be made, hopefully to include students in more aspects of the board's decision-making process. As the saying goes, you will never find time for anything. If you want time, you must make it. Next, I wanted to thank school system staff for the successful and informative COVID-19 vaccine town hall on January 21st. It is evident that our school system is capable of hosting great opportunities for our community to stay involved and stay informed. I am hopeful that board leadership will direct Dr. Hill and her staff to host a just as successful SRO forum in the near future. The SRO forum was requested by students in October, and Mr. Hancock moved to host the forum in December, which was approved unanimously by this board. Since then, our community has been left in limbo on this crucial event. I wanted to close by reminding students that on February 25th, I will be hosting a SMOB Advisory Council meeting open to all students. I want to reiterate that membership is open to anyone, and there are no requirements to attend. Students interested in attending the event should go to events.ccboesmob.com, events.ccboesmob.com. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone, from the break. At this time, I'm going to call forward the superintendent and Ms. Holstein, and I believe that members of the health department, I will leave it up to you, Dr. Hill, to introduce.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Mr. Graves, if you wouldn't mind pulling up our presentation. And while he's doing that, I'd like to, for the board as well as the listening public, clear up what I would characterize as a misstatement by our student board member, Mr. Hurd. His email address, that student board member email address, is something that's been in existence for years, and it has never had public access because the idea was to protect the child student board member from possibly offensive email from members of the public. That was set up years ago, well before my tenure as superintendent. What I have been working with Ms. Wilson and Mr. Hurd is unblocking that email address with certain conditions, understanding that he may receive potentially offensive email or potentially email with confidential information in it, in which our employees' interests need to be protected. So I just don't want anyone in the public to think that because a new student board member was appointed to the board, that suddenly his email access was blocked. That's incorrect. The student board member access has always been exactly as it is now, and we are currently working with the student board member to come to a compromise solution so that he does have access from the public. So thank you for letting me clear that up, Ms. Wilson, and I look forward to further conversation regarding that topic. So board members, we've had a robust discussion. We have listened to the health experts. And so we as your staff are making the following recommendations. The first is not a recommendation. The first is an action by your superintendent that is supported by the education article in law. And that is that I'm going to require that our staff members return to their school buildings on February 22nd. Those who are currently on an ADA telework accommodation will be allowed to continue in that status with their ADA paperwork intact. But board members, I hope at the end of the meeting today, you will consider and take action on staff recommendation to approve us moving to phase 2 on March 1st. And as a reminder, phase 2 includes 2,541 students across the district, small groups, special populations. They're attending 4 days a week, with Wednesdays still being a professional development day for teachers. And then we can together think about future phases at a later date. So that's the recommendation from this. And I know we'll probably have further conversation about this later. So thank you, Ms. Mackey, and Ms. Wilson, we'll go back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hill.
I think I saw in the chat that Mr. Hurd had his hand up.
I do apologize, Mr. Hurd. Your question?
Thank you, Chairman Wilson. And I wanted to thank Dr. Abney and Ms. Starn for their time. I know the students appreciate it, you taking the time to spend with us and go over all the nitty-gritty details. I have more of a question for staff, unfortunately, but at my advisory council, there was a lot of talk about the discussions that we're going to have today and the decisions we are going to have to make. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was there's a lot of misconception, especially within the student community. And so I was just wondering if Ms. Holstein could just reiterate and go over very briefly opting in and opting out of this phase, because there's a very large misconception among students that whatever decision we make, we're talking about forcing these student populations to go back.
No. So the communication that went out to every family on multiple occasions is this is a personal family choice. Every family makes a decision on what's best for their children. So for phase 2 students, if families decide that virtual instruction is best for them, then they elect virtual instruction, and those students will stay on virtual instruction for the rest of this school year. If families decide that their children are just not learning in this environment and are not thriving, then they may elect to opt their children into in-person instruction. For the other phases, that same decision will be made by each family. They've already made it for the most part. We have about 21,000 responses right now, and they have the same choice. So families whose children fall within phase 3 and phase 4 can make the decision to stay virtual for the rest of the school year. That's fine. We will continue to provide excellent instruction virtually, or they may decide to come to in-person instruction and be in the classroom, and we'll be following the hybrid model so that we're able to provide instruction in both platforms. Okay, any parents who have any questions at all, reach out to your school, reach out to central office. Mr. Jones and I will answer any question that any family member has. Please call us, and we'll help you if you're confused on how the decision that you need to make for your children.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much.
You're welcome.
The other bill I want to talk about is House Bill 1060 and Senate Bill 749, which Mr. Hurd had previously mentioned. This bill does provide full voting rights to the student board member, as he mentioned. It also goes well beyond that, and it changes the makeup of the local Board of Education in Charles County. What it would do is it would require the county commissioners to establish 6 school districts, 6 voting districts for the Board of Education. And each district would have 1 member elected from that district to the Board of Education. In addition, there will be 1 countywide member at large elected each election as well. And that countywide elected at large member would be automatically the chairman of the board. The candidate for the board would have to be at least 21 years of age and would have to be a county resident for at least 3 years. And the new members of the board would be seated the first Monday in December, which moves up the date for new board members by a couple weeks. Board members would serve 4-year terms, but the bill would be staggering the membership of the board so that there would be 3 members serving 4-year terms starting every second year of the decade, and the 4 years for the other members would start the 4th year of the decade, so that the membership would be staggered on the board. It would no longer be 4 years for all of the members being elected at once. There would be a 2 consecutive term limit for the board starting in the next election. Vacancies on the board would be filled by the county commissioners, which is a change. Currently, vacancies on the board are filled by Board of Education members directly. And the vacancy would have to be filled by a member from the district where the vacancy is created. And as I mentioned earlier, the student member would have full voting rights and would be selected by the Charles County Association of Student Councils. This bill has not been heard by the county commissioners or this board yet. We have not had any public hearings on it. There have been no public hearings in the county as far as I'm aware. The first public hearing will be in Annapolis on House Bill 1060, which has now been scheduled February 24th. As of this afternoon, it was scheduled for February 24th at 1:30 in the Ways and Means Committee in the House. That'll be the first chance that the public will have an opportunity to comment on the provisions of this bill. I'm available for any questions about these bills or others.
Comments, question? Mr. Hancock, and then Ms. McGraw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. I have a question for Mr. Hurd. Mr. Hurd, do you know when you recall hearing of Senate Bill 749?
The first time I heard of it was I believe on around Friday. The first time I saw the bill language itself was on Monday. I did not know of the contents of this bill. All I knew was that a bill existed.
Because we just heard about this too. The delegate, to my knowledge, I know the delegation has not reached out to me, and to my knowledge, has not reached out to any board member. It would certainly be nice to be included in these conversations for a bill that drastically, completely change our board. There are some things about it that we could probably support, I would think, as a board. There's a lot. It affects us directly as a board, and I just wish that the delegation had been in communication with us. Thank you.
Ms. McGraw?
Thank you, Chairman Wilson. Mr. Schwartz, you did answer a couple of my questions about whether or not there was any community input or commissioner input in this bill. But are you aware at all of what may have prompted this legislation? Why is there a need to make these changes?
I'm not aware of why Delegate Patterson or Senator Ellis put the bill in. I'm sure they have reasons they'd like to share with us. We have not seen those reasons. I'm not aware of why they put the bill in. I know that Mr. Hurd has asked for voting rights. This bill goes beyond even what he had asked for, so I'm not aware of their justification.
Thank you. I would just like to comment that, I'm really very disappointed at the lack of transparency on the part of our legislators regarding these bills. At the very least, I would have hoped that we as a board would have been consulted in some way. There are parts of this bill, both of these bills, that I could very much support, but then there are parts that are, I have some concerns with. But, as elected officials, I really do feel that we should have had the courtesy of being made aware that these bills were going to be entered. So I am pleased to hear that there's going to be a hearing on the February the 24th. And I would be interested in knowing whether or not the rest of the board members have any, share my concerns and would like to take a position on the bills.
Mr. Lucas? Mr. Lucas, I can't hear you.
Of course you can't, because I was muted. Thank you. I don't know if Mr. Schwartz knows the answer to this, but our commissioners in Charles County, they have to live in their district, but they're voted on, each of them by the entire county. Do you know other counties? Do they operate with regards to their delegates? So our delegates are voted on. We have 3 delegates for the county. But take a larger county like Prince George's County. Only a portion of that county is attributed to a specific delegate. So I guess what I'm asking, do the other counties, the other Southern Maryland counties, the entire county elects their delegates? Or do the delegates have a part of that county? Do you follow what I'm asking?
Yes, I'm not an expert on this, but I believe that St. Mary's County has delegation districts. They divide their county up into 3 districts, and so they have different delegates representing different districts. If that answers your question. And I believe Calvert County may be similar to that. Charles County District 28 is virtually the whole county, and it has the 3 delegates elected countywide.
So that was my question. Thank you. And of course, we're significantly larger than each of those 2 counties that you just mentioned. So, to what my colleagues, Mr. Hancock and Ms. McGraw said, having a courtesy from one elected official to another would have been nice. And as has been said, there are some things that we could get behind, but it's always better when you're when you put out the effort to have collaboration up front, you're trying to get buy-in from people. That's my end of my comments for right now. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mrs. Battle Lockhart and then Miss Brown.
I would agree with some of the things that's been said already, but the one thing that I want to, make a point to is that as elected officials, those that are currently in office, the conversation during the campaign, the conversation when we started this process was always about trying to come together differently and collaborate differently. And unfortunately, it apparently is starting to look like was just talk. And it's important that we come to, at some point, more now than ever, that we come together as all individual agencies to collaborate because we impact one another. And in this situation, like everybody said, there's some great things about what's in the plan, but there's some things that just don't make any sense. And we have to come together to compromise on what we feel is going to be right for the county overall, and really have to move and get out of our personal feelings and really think about the county and the people that put us in these positions, because it doesn't look healthy. It's very unhealthy, and we need healthy right now more than ever. And like I said, there's some really great benefits. This actually is interesting because it was a part of my thought process when I was on the campaign that, we'll benefit from, having an individual over different districts. We get to see differently, a different eye on, schools, so we can really bring things to the table to provide feedback and really kind of, because right now we're all seven, we willy-nilly and go get wherever we want to go. And it just brings structure because as you guys know, I love structure. So I can appreciate that piece of it, but I want to be honest. For somebody that's had never been in a position, I feel as though 4 years is just the right amount of time for you to actually learn and understand the system. And now you're trying to strip 2 years off me. I can't be as effective as I could be if you're stripping my years away from me. I understand the terms and I understand the staggering. That makes sense. But I just think we need to have a conversation about it and come to the best decision we can as a community, and stop trying to, be so divided. I'm so over this part of it. Sorry. Thank you for letting me share.
I believe Ms. Brown was next.
I am very disappointed in the lack of collaboration. I believe that the last time we were all together, we stated that we really wanted to collaborate with our delegates, and that's not happening. I don't know what it takes for it to happen, but if I were a parent, I'm a grandparent now, I'd be disappointed that I had no input into any of these decisions that are being made. I mean, no input from the community, no meeting with the commissioners, just put legislation in and don't collaborate with the body that it actually is affecting, and that's us. So I'm just disappointed that we can't seem to get to collaborate with our delegates, because it's very simple, and I think we're very easy to get together to collaborate. I'm just disappointed that just can't seem to take place.
I will go ahead and make my comments. I just want the public to understand that historically, as a board, every year we have a legislative breakfast, and it's an invitation that is extended both to the county commissioners and to our Southern Maryland delegation. And the intent, or my understanding, is it's an opportunity for collaboration. Secondly, in a separate public forum, the EACC invites both the school board, the county commissioners, and the delegation for an opportunity for collaboration. This is not the first year that our Southern Maryland delegation has put forth a bill and it got passed without collaboration with the school board. I know and I believe that we want to collaborate. And like Ms. Brown, I'm perplexed and I am disappointed because this year there was a number of bills that was pre-filed, and then our delegation met with us and not afford us the opportunity for collaborative input. So we're trying, and what also needs to be understood is when these bills go forward, the education community is pretty big and pretty broad. And so educators from one school district to another, we compare notes. And it's kind of embarrassing when you're sitting in a committee meeting and you get asked and find out surprisingly that a bill has been introduced. I propose to go back to the question that Ms. McGraw brought up is, I think number one, I think we need to write a letter to our Southern delegation and just re-emphasize we want to collaborate and we want a means of communicating and having a great opportunity to provide input, because there are over 2,000 bills that are being proposed in the Maryland Assembly as we speak. And every day they can add more. So it's already a competitive process to get a bill through. When we work in a collaborative effort, we get a much better product and a better opportunity in a competitive legislative process to get things accomplished. So it's not just the collaboration, but it's also about getting things done that are relevant. And I want the public to also weigh in that the structure of this bill that's being proposed to change it to a 6th district, I think that is a Board of Education concern, but I think the public needs to be afforded an opportunity because this is their school system, and just as we should be afforded as elected officials as a school system, this particular bill really should be presented to the public so that they are aware that there's a significant structural change that is being proposed, and there was no public process, no explanation. You know, if you're going to change something, always start with why, and always ensure that the why is better than what you're proposing. When Mr. Schwartz, when you provided an overview, that was the first time that I had an understanding of the bill. Parts of it, I can foresee that that's a good thing. The part that is alarming to me is after we consulted with our state senator, they added the part about the student voting rights. So you asked us our opinion and you completely disavow. So good conversation is warranted here. And I think February 24th, I think we need Mr. Schwartz to kind of keep us apprised of how far along this bill is going to go. But I think at a minimum, a letter needs to be submitted just saying, we want the doors of communications open and we want to collaborate. And, you know, I just think that opportunities presented itself and it was missed. And my other concern is what are the other bills that have been proposed, like the student resource officer that was pre-filed. And so I would just suggest at a minimum a letter be written. Mr. Lucas, do you have your hand up?
I do. Mr. Schwartz, could you say again, 24 February, what specifically was happening in Annapolis the first day that bill will be read?
That's the date of the hearing in the House Ways and Means Committee. And it was just scheduled this afternoon.
Okay, so could you kind of briefly describe then that, not just for this bill specifically, but what does that mean?
There will be a chance for public testimony, both written and oral testimony. I think it would be helpful for the board to have a presence there, at least written, but oral as well, a verbal testimony as well to explain the board's stance on not just the bill as a whole, but just provisions of the bill, individual provisions that you think are good or bad, so that the members of the Ways and Means Committee can understand what our feelings are about the bill.
So, thank you. So Madam Chair, I would certainly agree with you and suggest that on the 22nd, which is our fourth Monday, what we hold for a work session, that perhaps we could address this and nail down specifically what we'd like to say in terms of testimony from the 24th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Ms. McGraw, and then Ms. Brown.
Mr. Schwartz, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that you have to sign up 2 days in advance if you want to testify on any one of the bills. Am I correct?
Different committees have different rules, but I can make sure that we have a place for sign up at least if the chairman is willing to be there, or Mr. Lucas or Ms. Brown from the legislative committee, however you want to do it, but we can have the sign up before we actually submit the testimony.
I'm available.
I am as well.
Is that the will of the board to still proceed with a work session? I'm sorry, Ms. Brown.
No, I was saying yes, proceed with the work session, but I also had something else to say.
Go ahead.
In as much as I had no input into this legislation, I moved to take a position of opposition to it.
Is that a motion?
Yes, it is.
Do I hear a second?
Second that.
Been moved by Ms. Brown and second by Mr. Hancock that a position be taken of opposition against the proposed legislation proposal. I don't have the exact name of the bill, Mr. Schwartz. I want to make sure that the motion is clear.
It's 1060.
House Bill 1060, Senate Bill 749. The name of the bill is Charles County Board of Education Membership Alterations.
Okay, discussion? Mr. Lucas?
As was mentioned, you can oppose a bill or you can also support it with amendments. And I think everyone that spoke said that there were things in here that they could support. I think we need to put aside any personal feelings that we may have and vote in a way that, of course, at the end, what we feel is best for the school system. I certainly don't like everything that's in here, but I can support some of the things. I mean, if it's the will of the board, I'll certainly stand behind that. But supporting it with amendments gives us the opportunity to provide constructive feedback to the legislature to hopefully change some of the things in the bill. Thank you.
Ms. McGraw?
I agree with Mr. Lucas, because I was one of the ones at the outset that said, while there are many parts of this bill that I can support, and some parts that I cannot, I would be more inclined to be in favor of opposing it with amendments, because I'm not totally against it, but there's many parts of it that I think go against what I can stand for.
Mr. Hancock?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do agree with my colleagues, about items being in this proposal that I can get behind. But to me, it's just so directly targeted to us, and there has been no communication. If I were to put an amendment on it, I would say we oppose it unless we are involved in the process. Because if we're not involved in the process, then we have no voice in it. I mean, a lot of this is targeted directly towards us. When you talk about district voting and being voted by your district, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But can someone tell me any other office in this county where that happens? Commissioners have districts. They're all voted at large. We have, with the exception of Delegate Proctor, we have 3 delegates that represent a large majority of the county in one district. So to me, it appears, it certainly appears it's directly targeted us for some reason without any communication as to why. So, perhaps opposing it is not the best way to move forward. But if we're not offered a seat at the table, then I think my opinion is that we should oppose it. Perhaps we should allow the opportunity to have a seat at the table first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock. If I might add, my concern is the organizational change. I think this specific bill, excluding the student rights, we can have a conversation about the student rights, but I think the bill is something that the public, this is a organizational structural change that I think the citizens of the community should weigh in. We as board members, we fall into that structure, and we can certainly weigh in, but we should be more inclined to look at policy. My concern is the parents, the guardians, the average day citizens. They should have been afforded the opportunity. This is a significant change for public process, for transparency. There's parts of this bill I agree with my colleague. I now that it has been explained to me, I can agree to it, but I really think this really is more of a general public weigh-in versus strictly a Board of Education. The second part to that is I don't like the idea that they stuck in the student votes, the student voting rights policy. I think that the student voting rights could be a legislation on its own merit, but be transparent. Give it the respect that it's due, and not kind of attach it into a bill, and then for us not to know about it. It just, I'm concerned that the transparency to the public, unlike, say, I am concerned about the transparency of the school resource officer. That's a policy thing that definitely we should weigh in. That should be something that we definitely should have been afforded the opportunity. But now you're talking about a organizational structure, a governing body being significantly changed, and it's not being afforded to the citizens of Charles County to say, hey, now this bill is saying that the county commissioners decide who the chair is. That's something that the public should be afforded the opportunity. And so I do agree that, opposition is never a good thing, but I just don't like the lack of transparency. And this significant change warrants more public opportunity to weigh in. And I'm disappointed in the way that it has been presented. I would have much preferred that the student voting rights bill been separate and give it the respect. If we're going to give the student voting rights, give it the respect, give it a bill. But to kind of mix an organizational structure with student voting rights, I think they could have done a better job. Mr. Lucas.
Does any other board member have a comment?
Mrs.
So-
Abel does.
So-
Go ahead,
so I-
Mr. Lucas.
I was going to make a motion unless someone else had a comment.
I believe Mrs. Abel waived. I just want to make sure she was afforded the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. I've had my hand up for a while here.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, I know it's hard to see everybody on here. I just wanted to support my fellow board members and the disappointment and the lack of transparency and the communication that has taken place with our delegation, not only on this bill, but on several others. And while I am very disappointed in their lack of communication, as several of us have stated, there are things in this bill that we possibly could support. And there are other things that are very concerning that we cannot. In my opinion, a total opposition to the entire bill, we're just like digging our heels in and putting up a fight just because they didn't communicate. I would much rather see us oppose it or support it with amendments taking place, and then invite them for a discussion on the bill, if possible. The ones that put it forward, I believe it was Ms. Patterson and Mr. Ellis. Again, move forward with our work session and maybe go over the topic. Yes, sign up and speak at the public hearing, but reach out to those individuals and have a discussion with them. But first, we need to hash out what it is in this bill that we support and what we cannot support. I mean, for me personally, I can state that the district thing is not such a bad idea. I've always said that we should have staggered terms. What happens if all 7 of us are outed at the same time? However, the part about commissioners filling the vacancies, I think that could become very detrimental. In the past, when there has been board members leave, and I've served long enough to have done that, I think 3 times now, the board itself took on applications and put another member in place, appointed another member. I was actually one of those members at the very start in 2004 that had to be interviewed and appointed by the remaining board members. So I think we need to have a discussion on the points of this as well, which could take place at the work session. But I would like to make an amendment to the motion on the table that we vote in favor of supporting the bill with amendments. Sorry, Mike.
Well,
Is that what you were about to say?
No, I was going to go a slightly different route, but that's what I was going to suggest was that we table our vote till our work session. And actually, what you just said, Ms. Abel, about providing an opportunity for our delegates that submitted the bill to respond, I think fits in well with that. I think all of us now are responding kind of viscerally, having seen this pretty much for the first time. And,
So I have, sorry, Mr. Lucas, there is an amendment on the table that needs a second or it's going to die.
Well,
So,
it's,
that's the way it works.
well, we have to vote. So your
I'll
amendment,
second it. Yeah, I'll second it.
the amendment though is to support with amendments.
The amendments. Yeah.
Okay, don't we have to vote on the first thing?
I think we have to vote on the first one because
Yeah.
it was a motion was made and then seconded, and we were in discussion.
Correct.
So
let me try to speed along this because I think we're getting a little confused about motions and seconds and amendments. The original motion was to oppose the bill. it doesn't sound like the board is interested in opposing the bill outright. It looks like that's not enough support. But if you want to take a vote on that, and then we can go to Ms. Abel's motion, a separate motion to support with amendments, and do that as a separate motion. So, Mrs. Wilson, I'll turn it back to you. I'm not sure if you wanted to separate it out and have the original vote on the motion to oppose first, and then go to the second motion next.
I would prefer to finish the first motion and close it out, and then if Miss Abel prefers to make another motion, then it's a clean start. So hearing any further discussion, who's in favor?
There is one.
Say again.
Actually, sorry, Madam Chair, I just wanted to. Sorry, I'm not trying to drag this long. I know I had seconded that motion, but after discussing, we can still take a vote on it. I'm not going to vote for it. Thank you.
Okay.
Eric, can I withdraw my motion?
I think that's the quickest way to do this. Why don't we go to Ms. Abel's motion? If you, Ms. Abel, you want to say your motion again, and we can just do that and move this along.
So go ahead. So Ms. Brown has withdrawn her motion. Ms. Abel, did I see your hand?
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we support HB 1060 and SB 749 with amendment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. McGraw, the motion has been made by Ms. Abel and seconded by Ms. McGraw. Discussion.
And if I could clarify that those amendments will be determined at the work session on the 22nd, is that what the board's?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Hearing Mr. Hancock.
Sorry, I just want to. So we don't taking a vote to accept this with amendments is our avenue to make amendments. Correct. I have a hard time supporting it, but I will to make amendments. Thank you.
Let me just clarify to the board that there's no opposition with amendments that the General Assembly would accept. So it's either support with amendments or oppose. So there's really no other way to do it. If we want to have changes made, it's really to support with amendments.
Thank
Mr. Hurd.
Mr. Hurd.
Mr. Hurd.
Mr. Hurd.
I just wanted to state for the record, without knowing the amendments themselves, the student perspective cannot vote in favor of this motion or cast their opinion in support of.
That's understood. There's any further discussion? All in favor? I will, well, raise your hand. It looks like everyone is in favor.
I will abstain.
Motion carried.
Okay. You don't.
Continue.
Continuing on, our next item, Dr. Hill, is a continuation of suspension of board policies for Mr. Schwartz.
Ms. Wilson, I think we need to do unfinished business.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Is there any unfinished business? Mr. Lucas.
I think before we had talked about, as was mentioned earlier in the meeting, Mr. Hancock brought it up to have a public meeting regarding the SROs.
Okay.
So, and the board did agree to that, correct? So
Yeah.
I apologize. Maybe that's a new agenda item topic, not unfinished
Yep.
business. But I think we need to nail down a date for that.
Yes. Ms. McGraw, did you have your hand up?
I was just going to mention that it is noted in future agenda items. So we can set our date. I mean, that's not out of order.
Proposed date?
Ms. Wilson, if it's an agreement of the board, staff can come up with a couple of dates and provide those to the board at the work session.
I see a lot of nodding of the heads. I think that's doable. Thank you, Dr. Hill. Any other unfinished business? Okay, I think it is safe to move on to new business.
Thank you. We have the recommendation from the superintendent to continue the suspension of board policies. These are the same policies that were suspended by the board continually for the last several months, last month as well. And the only changes are noted at the back of the document that's posted on board docs that I'll point out. One suspension that we're recommending to no longer suspend is the one concerning public forum. We are having a public forum today in our board meeting, and we hope to have that moving forward. So that policy would no longer be suspended. And the other two policies we're looking to change the suspension is concerning eligibility for athletics and grades for secondary students. So those are the two policies at the end of the document. Other than that, the document has the other policies we're looking for continued suspension. And I will defer to Ms. Holstein and Mr. Jones to talk about the two policies at the end of the document concerning eligibility and grading.
So I'll start with grading. At prior board meeting, we asked for a one-time suspension of the grading policy to allow us to adjust the failure grade to a 50. Being that we are now this far into still having schools just virtual, and with this ever-changing landscape that we're dealing with the COVID crisis, we feel that nothing has changed significantly. So we're continuing to request that students are able to earn a 50 for a failing grade.
Mrs. Battle Lockhart, did you have a comment? Mr. Hurd.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Chair Wilson. I just wanted to reiterate my thoughts from the last time we suspended this policy, and I believe they remain the same due to the same reasons, and that is empathy, making decisions with empathy. And as Ms. Holstein said, the rate tripled. And if anyone here can tell themselves that that tripling is not due to COVID, I think we're fooling ourselves. And then the question becomes, should these students be held accountable for something that they couldn't control, something that we struggle to control, something that has affected their mental health unlike anything else? And I have confidence that this board will make the right decision, but I just wanted to make sure I reiterated and applauded the board for their decision last time to make decisions with empathy and hold students in high regard for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hurd.
Thank you. Board members, Dr. Hill, good evening. My name is Eric Valentine, the La Plata High School Student Liaison. As most of you likely remember, I expressed serious concerns about fine and performing arts in the virtual environment earlier this year. I'm pleased to say that with hard work and creative solutions from both staff and students, we've been successful in overcoming most of the challenges we face. Virtual concerts and shows, as well as an online art gallery, have been relatively effective in filling a void for students' desire to display their hard work. A competitive twist to this year's solo ensemble is a welcome change and great way to enrich the virtual environment. I encourage board members to check La Plata High School's website for updates regarding a performing arts showcase this Thursday night. Looking towards the spring, I know many students, especially seniors, are eager to see what alternatives will be provided for festival in All County, and that Mr. Bodemer and his staff will not disappoint. Now I would like to shift focus to the School Resource Officer Forum students originally requested at October's meeting. We're guaranteed they will receive at December's meeting and are still eagerly awaiting a date to be set for. I cannot describe how discouraging it is for students to see that this board's leadership, who so often calls on other community officials to engage in the collaborative process, leaves students out of a constructive discussion on how we can alter and improve our school resource officer program. All of you had the opportunity to attend the forum the student member hosted and witness the passion and bright ideas students had for this topic. I hope that this board will hold themselves accountable to their commitment to students and act swiftly in setting a date for a forum in the near future. We're counting on you. Thank you. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. Our next speaker for the evening is Michelle Amial. Michelle, I can see you. If you can go ahead and turn your camera on and enable your audio, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Michelle.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I would like to say good evening to the board and to everybody listening. And my name is Michelle Amial. I'm a junior at La Plata High School. And I just wanted to come here and talk today, not about my personal, I'm so sorry, my lighting just fell. I came here not to talk about my personal online experience this past year, but about my youngest brother. He goes to the Gwen Center and he is speech impaired. He was actually diagnosed April of 2020 last year. And so that's been a whole roller coaster for my family. And he started going to the Gwen Center about winter of 2019. And he was showing a lot of improvement. He was starting to talk a little bit more. He was starting to actually write and draw in color. And he was showing a lot of progress. And then, of course, we all know what happened. COVID came around. And it's just been really, really hard for him. And I know a lot of his peers to just really adapt to this online format. He's, at least from what I've seen him regress a lot. He's not writing as much. And it's just been really hard to watch as an older sister. And I try to help out, but I'm busy too. I have a lot of homework. I'm an AP student, and both of my parents are actually healthcare professionals. So they're not at home. I'm in clubs. My other brothers have their own things. And so it's just really hard when we're all over the place. And he always, I feel, gets left behind. And I feel like my family is representative of a lot of people who have children in the special education program or at Gwen. And it just really hurts my heart because, sorry, it just really hurts my heart because all these kids are just getting left behind and we're so focused on ourselves. And I just wanted to bring out another perspective, which we think about all the time, but we don't always see. So that's really all I wanted to say. I just wanted to share that story. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Our next speaker for the evening is Thema Green. Thema, if you can go ahead and turn your camera on, please, and unmute yourself to start.
Hello, my name is Thema Green and I'm a senior from St. Charles High School. So my question is, why does the school curriculum only allot 1 month for Black students to learn about their history? And this is a major issue because confining the history of an entire race of people into 28 days, notably the shortest month of the year, not only diminishes the significance of their contributions, but also constrains the students as they're not taught the significance of understanding one's own history. That includes understanding their identity, gaining perspective of the world, and overall learning that they can achieve greatness. Representation does matter. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Our next speaker for the evening is Ellen Blumhart. Ms. Blumhart, if you could go ahead and turn on your camera and enable your audio for us, please. Ms. Blumhart, are you there? I can see your name.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me and see me?
And hear you, yes, thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you again for providing the opportunity to speak about my experience schooling my children during the last 11 months. This public forum, which has been absent from March 2020 until now, is an important way for your constituents to be heard and considered. I have a 6-year-old neurotypical son and a 4-year-old daughter with special needs at Dr. James Craig Elementary School. Both children have fantastic teachers, but virtual learning has not been equally effective and accessible to my daughter because of her disabilities. On the other hand, my son is still making substantial academic progress with only minimal support from me. Virtual learning is working well for him to a reasonable degree. Before the pandemic, we were already desperately in need of help. Mary, my daughter, has a disorder, is nonverbal, has dozens of seizures a day, cannot feed herself, and requires intensive therapy from private therapists and the school system to make progress in the most basic life skills. The pandemic has caused us to lose all in-home care support while at the same time requiring us to facilitate one-on-one hands-on education with virtual coaching from teachers and therapists. This is in addition to us attending to her many special needs, frequent night wakings, doctor's appointments, changes in medication, and spending 3 hours feeding her per day. After months of school, this became a burden we could no longer bear. Since December, we have paid $1,000 out of pocket per month for an aide to come to our house to facilitate virtual learning. On top of this trauma, I have written several emails to each board member to share my input, as well as to board mail over the last 4 months, and have received either no response or extremely limited responses. The exceptions are Dr. Hill, Mrs. Battle Lockhart, and Ian Hurd, who have been responsive and compassionate. We are appreciative that Dr. Hill and her staff have highlighted how important it is for these vulnerable populations of students in phase 2 to get back into the building. I would like to reiterate my invitation from last November for any board member to observe exactly what virtual learning looks like for my daughter. It takes a village to raise a child, especially one with special needs. As hard as I try, I am not a village. None of this has been fair or just, and I hope that the experience of families like mine is thoughtfully considered. I urge you to listen to your local, state, and federal experts in education and public health when making the decision about what is best for my daughter's well-being and education. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Last item is the reopening of schools. Mr. Hurd, I'm sorry.
I think Miss Abel had her hand up before me.
Go ahead, Mr. Hurd.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Wilson. I think we've hit a point where there's just there's clashing options here. And when we listen to public forum, there's obviously we're left with the assumption that we satisfy one group, don't satisfy the other. And I personally, as the student perspective, am extremely interested in an option that suits everyone. And I think Mr. Lucas was alluding to exploring options that can pair people who have that enormous need with staff who have either the luxury of the vaccine or good health. They can make that personal decision. And I think from the student interest here, we hear the slogan, when everybody has a choice, everybody wins. When nobody has a choice, nobody wins. And I think this board, it's just heartbreaking to hear what we've heard over public comment. It's not that students want to go back to school. This demographic of students need to go back to school, and they're suffering. This is cruel. And it's not intentional. It's just what we're left with. It's what we're doing. But we have an obligation as the providers of public education to move forward with whatever means we have available to us. And it's 7:30 p.m. If we haven't exhausted every single stone uncovered every option. I'm extremely interested in creative solutions, not just a staff recommendation necessarily, or a typical solution of what other jurisdictions have done, but looking into turning over every stone. So I'm especially interested in the feasibility of pairing staff members who are comfortable with students with that enormous need. Thank you.
Majority of the teachers I've heard want the chance to be vaccinated. Now, I don't have the power to tell the teachers when they can come back into school. We don't have that power, that superintendent's power, but we can control when the students come back. The main thing I've heard from teachers is they want to be vaccinated, and we owe that to them. That we're so close. We've come this far.
Yeah.
We've come this far. We're so close. We're just weeks away. Finally. My motion on the table, I originally said March 15th. Make a motion that we go into phase 2 Monday, March 22nd. I feel that shows a good faith effort to allow teachers to get vaccinated. That's my motion.
Mr. Schwartz, are you on the line? Because I want to make sure from a parliamentarian, we had a motion that we started. And I want to consider Mr. Hancock's motion, but I want to make sure administratively this is clean.
I'm sorry, and I didn't realize if there was a motion being started. I apologize.
No worries. That's why we're in
a long night. I'm sorry.
No worries. It's been a long night, and I just want to make sure that this is a clean start, because originally we started the conversation with the option as proposed by the superintendent, and then we entered into discussion. So we're in that discussion of that option. So whoever made the original motion can pull the motion back.
Hancock.
Mr. Hancock.
I'd like to amend the start date from March 1st to March 22nd.
Okay. Is there
Or make a motion to amend that or do we have to vote on the original thing and then vote on the amendment? I'm not sure.
Yeah, again, let's try to cut down on how many votes we have. Mr. Hancock, if your motion is to come back to school on March, was it 27th? Is that what I heard? 22nd. Okay. That's the motion on the table. Why don't we just go with that? And we need a second for that to move forward, and we'll go from there.
I just wanted to make sure that there was a clean direction. So Mr. Hancock has made a motion. I need a second.
Second.
Motion is seconded by Ms. Brown. Discussion. Mr. Hurd.
As I said earlier, I think this is a situation where we need to weigh all options, but I do not think this is the right choice. And from the student perspective, I think this is a severe disservice to the parents and students that we heard from at public comment. I understand that there's hard decisions to be made and there's compromises to be made, but I don't view this as a compromise at all. And I believe this is an extreme proposal that has the potential to devastate these families that are on the edge. I just, from the student perspective, this is the worst case scenario, and it's extremely disappointing to see the discussion leaning towards this option.
Mr. Hurd, if I may. Sorry, Ms. Wilson.
Wait a minute, Mr. Lucas. Let me recognize Ms. Abel. Ms. Abel?
Thank you. I would have to agree with Mr. Hurd. I cannot support a date of March 22nd. That is rough estimate, looking at 6 weeks from now, that our special needs students and our students without internet access are still in limbo. I cannot support that. Thank you.
Mr. Lucas?
So just so everyone's clear, okay, it was, March 1st was what was proposed by the superintendent. Now we're saying March 22nd. So that's a 3-week difference. So when I was going to ask Mr. Hurd, you talked about trying to reach a compromise if you had a suggestion for something different. And I'd like to hear that when I'm finished speaking. But Ms. Abel just talked about the learning centers. So we still have learning centers going on, if I'm not mistaken. And we have students of teachers that are in the schools right now, and we're not in phase 2. Those things happened without the board approving them. And I'm not saying that that's good or bad. I'm just stating it as a matter of fact. So if we were to go with what the superintendent has proposed, but merely push it back 3 weeks, there's nothing that says that between that time, I'll say some small subgroup that really needs the attention the most couldn't come back, as long as there was some some choice for everyone that's involved. And to Dr. Hill's point, yeah, there's been people working all year, but there haven't been the amount of students in the building that we're talking about. Students coming in on buses, and that's a whole new dynamic. And the question was asked, well, how is it fair? Well, it's fair because you're not telling anyone to do something that they're not comfortable doing. And yeah, I know comfortable is a squishy word, but there's people that have said that from a work perspective that they don't mind coming in the classroom. And for the parents of these kids too, I mean, it's not going to be like it was before COVID. Your kid's going to wear a mask all day and be 6 feet apart. The teacher's not going to be near them. So that's something else to consider too. But I just want to, just so for the board and for public's being able to see where we're at, beginning of March and then 3 weeks later. I mean, it's 3 weeks and allows the opportunity for our people that work in the system to receive the vaccine. Thank you.
Mrs. Battle Lockhart?
I'm sorry. I just wanted to share, I found the options. So option 1 is it looks like the alignment is what they chose. So with that being said, and speaking of the Big Thursday, we still are looking at weather, possible inclement weather. I can't talk. So there's a potential of that pushing the opportunity of the staff or the people that want to get vaccinated. So with looking at the options, I feel based off what David said and what we've been hearing, compromise option 2 says students return phase 2 on March 8th. Maybe that's an option. I'm just throwing that out on the table because that was on the option anyway. That the staff return on March 1st and the students return on March 8th, and we go from there. As an option. But like we all said, I don't think there's no perfect answer, but based off of the conversation to find compromise, that's kind of what I see based off what was presented to us before out of the 3 options to choose from, and based off what everybody shared. to find balance in this dialogue. I feel as though, you know, the March 8th return for the student date is fair. I mean, in my opinion. So just wanted to share that. And the only thing I want to say, I understand the frustration, and you know, me as an educator, me as a leader of an organization of young people, I have a challenge when the frustration is that normally, yeah, this is all about the students. It's normally always about the students. We've normally never went through a pandemic like this. So we're talking about lives, and we don't exempt teachers and staff's lives from this process. And I agree with what Mike Lucas said earlier, is that this wasn't on the table at the beginning of the process. Now it's on the table at this process. So how dare anybody speak to the fact that, you know, the kids, we should only focus on kids. We focus on the system. I want to make that very clear. The entire system, nobody is exempt from this process. Because if we don't take care of the people that's got to pour into these students, we won't have anybody to pour into the students that we're focusing on. And that includes my daughter. So don't sit here and talk to me. This is frustrating for me. Don't you dare talk to me and say the student is not the priority. The student is a priority, but the students won't have a place to go if we don't have teachers that's taken care of and considered, and staff members consider. I'm not saying leave the food service people out of this conversation. I fight for food service people all the time in what I do. I am a food service worker. I teach food service people. So this is a very different situation that the whole world is dealing with. And how dare we as leaders of a system, when the community elected us, we can't single anybody out. We have to consider everyone in order for our kids to be fed healthy, not by food, by content, by everything. So until we get that together and get out of our personal feelings and understand we have to lead accordingly, and we have to, I just recently wrote a book, and I'm not promoting myself, we have to find balance between the hard work and the head work. And right now, this is where we're challenged to find the balance between the two. But don't forget, we're dealing with humans. Teachers are scared. My phone is buzzing, my daggone email is going off, and people are constantly, they're scared. So don't tell me it's just about the student. It's about everybody. Don't leave no system telling the system that it's about one side of just a child. We can't teach the children without them.
Thank you, Mrs. Lockhart. Mr. Hancock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that, and I certainly understand Ms. Battle Lockhart's passion. You know, without the teachers, without the staff, I'm married to somebody that I'm making a decision that's going to affect directly. I think we do need to keep in mind that we do need to take care of everyone, and I do feel that I have a motion on the table that is the best of my ability to be able to do that right now. I would ask, and if people have discussion, that's fine, but there is a motion on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock. Anybody else that would like to enter into discussion? Dr. Hill?
I have one last comment in that we all have, I think, laid our opinions out onto the table, but I haven't heard anyone refer back to Dr. Abney and Amber Starn, who among the group here are the only ones with medical degrees and medical expertise. I think it's unfair that we are discounting their words, which were, the vaccine and the reopening decisions do not have to be married to each other. They looked at our data, they looked at the number of children per building, and they said it was safe to open. So as emotional as all of this is, I get that. We need to rely upon experts. We are education experts. We are not medical experts. And I think it's a shame that we've had this last however many minutes of conversation and we have not once referred to Dr. Abney, our health officer. Thank you, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. Mr. Lucas,
So,
and then Mr. Stoddard.
so I never heard Dr. Abney say it was safe to open. I listened very carefully, and I made a lot of notes, and she made a lot of comments, and it's not her. I can understand why she wouldn't want to make a comment like that. She said that she liked the plan, and that if all the procedures, it was a well thought out plan, but if you followed the mitigation processes, and it's that second part, following the mitigation processes, that is going to be challenged. Okay? We're not following the processes now. And I've seen it with my own eyes, and I don't blame anybody for that because it's a hard thing to do. I can only imagine when kids come back how difficult it's going to be not to follow all the processes and maintain distance like that. So, Mr. Hancock put a motion on the floor. Again, if there's something magical that I'm not aware of about getting people, about opening on the 1st, I'm all about trying to accommodate that. But if it's everything that was put before us, even the date of the 15th, I have issue with because there might be some people that don't even get the second vaccine by the 15th. And if that getting the vaccine was something that was important for people to make a decision, I think that's something that we need to understand as well. Thank you.
If I may, I would like to weigh in. I haven't said anything because I have been carefully listening. I would tell you I like Mr. Hancock's proposal. In part, I think the common ground here is the vaccination is the one thing, the one safety blanket that we can give the teachers. What's out of our control is the logistics of getting all the vaccinations to our teachers. I think based on the trend, the March 22nd date is a doable date. That I think it's a high probability that we can get our teachers vaccinated. The other part to this, and I had the privilege of having to sit through Dr. Abney's briefing last night in another capacity. And during that briefing, she talked about fear. And everybody on this discussion, we understand that it is about the kids. It is about the students. But it's also about the teachers. There is a portion of the community, the African American community, that has a trust issue with the vaccination, coupled with we have a number of elderly grandparents that are caregivers that fall into that 1A, 1B category, so that March 22nd plays into factor for that population. And it's in the context that I'm thinking about the whole child. I'm actually leaning more towards bumping it up towards the beginning of March. But March 22nd is a balance. It's a compromise. I'm trying to figure out why not March 15th. And I do believe, to Dr. Hill's point, that Dr. Abney is saying, just getting the vaccination is not going to be enough. It is also making sure we wear our mask, we wash our hands, etc. And I am willing to go forward with the March 22nd date, and it is because of the safety blanket. And I think logistically, the vaccines that timeline will afford us the best opportunity to support that. And I think we can beat beat these dates around back and forth. I think we just need to find a common ground date. It's not going to be the perfect answer, but I will tell you that the line in the sand for me has always been at least get the second vaccination for the teachers. And I think once we get that phase 2 back in the buildings and get established, then the trust and the flow of things, and given the fact that a third of our student population is a manageable, I would not advocate for choice because I think it would be a logistics nightmare to manage. But I'm looking at the mid-March timeframe. So I believe Mr. Starter and then Mrs. Holstein had their hands up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to address 3 points that I've heard repeatedly. Number one, I think it is gravely incorrect to say that that our staff that has been in the building and our almost 1,000 children that have been in the building since August 1st have not been following procedures. I think that they are following the universal precautions and they are doing very well with it. I think that the proof in that is that working with the health department, as we have done since the beginning of this, we do our own contact tracing. We have some of the most robust contact tracing in the nation that is followed by a number of different school systems that have come to us and asked us. We have had 7 cases of community spread of staff members within inside of our school. In every case, multiple universal precautions have not been followed, whether that is people not wearing their masks, whether that is people deciding to spend too much time within 15 minutes or over 15 minutes within 6 feet, whether it is people who have continued to come to work ill, thinking that it was just a cold or just an allergy and having multiple symptoms, which I should have said earlier, of COVID that have been disregarded for one reason or another in every case, but only 7 since March. And that is an accurate number. And what we have done, and in every one of those cases, we discuss them at length with the health department, the experts, Amber Starn, Dr. Abney, and their team. Secondly, I'd also like to bring up that as we've talked about repeatedly, vaccines are not relevant according to not only the Maryland Department of Education, the Maryland Department of Health, and the local health department, but also the CDC and our president. They have all said the exact same things, that they are not relevant as it relates to opening school. They are a tool. They are not the tool to be considered for return. The last thing that I would like to point out, there has been 2,400 appointments that have been graciously given to us by the health department ending on Thursday. Currently, it is now 8:15 in the evening. The email was sent out for 640 spots at 12:27. There are currently still openings available for our teachers, our substitutes, and our building services workers, and our food services workers, and every one of our workers that is available, and they have not filled it yet. I am comfortable at this point saying that every CCPS staff member has had the ample opportunity to obtain a COVID vaccine, the first series of COVID vaccine by Thursday, yes, depending on the weather, but by Thursday. 28 days from Thursday would be March 11th. Now, there was also a statement made that said that full effectiveness does not take place until 12 to 14 days after. That is also potentially not an informed statement. After the first vaccine, a recent study just showed that it is effective at 80.2% after the first vaccine. The second vaccine can take it up to over 94% because most of our staff has received the Moderna vaccine. That does happen at the 12 to 14 day mark after the second vaccine. However, the thing to keep in mind is that even after the first vaccine, if an individual does happen to come down with COVID, one of the wonderful side effects of this vaccine, and we have seen it with inside of our staff, is that the symptoms are greatly reduced and the recovery time is also greatly reduced. I only say this to correct some of the things that have been said. as we move through this, I think it's important that you make your decision. Whatever your decision is going to be made with the most factual information that comes from our experts at the health department that we continue to work with, and the research that we do, and the things that we know, the history that we have since March. But I would say that it is a completely incorrect statement that 1,000 kids and the number of students that we have, or the number of staff that we have every day, are not following our processes and procedures. And the proof is in the pudding every day that we see. Madam Chair, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Starnet. I was muted. Mrs. Holstein, did you want to say something?
Just very quickly, as Dr. Hill said, we certainly are not doctors, but we have between us and our staffs hundreds of years of experience. And I can tell you that looking at a calendar and looking at weeks of when to bring students back is significant to a student who has multiple disabilities. A week can make a difference for these children. And we have children that have not learned much, no matter how hard our teachers have worked, because they can't learn in this setting. So every week that we push this back is significant. And, you know, I also understand how it would be easy to say school, you know, choice, if you want to come back and you're comfortable. And it's not just logistics. We'll stay up for nights trying to figure this out. That's what we do. But you cannot take a highly trained, achieved teacher and fill someone in their spot that can work with these students who need so much. They're not interchangeable. So I know that sounds good, and it's not logistics for us. If we could do it, we'll do it. But it does not work like that. We have children who need to be with highly trained teachers. And we can't just move them from school to school. That's so disruptive. The relationship they have with their teacher, even if it's virtual, is important. So that just doesn't work. Thank you, Ms. Wilson.
Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown?
I'd like to ask Jason a question. Is there a way you can tell out of those 650 slots that you mentioned, how many have been taken by our teachers?
There is not, ma'am. It went out to everybody. We have sent out multiple notifications today. Not only have I sent out the initial, we sent out a second email, a mass email to all CCPS about midway through the day, encouraging them. I also posted it on a famous social media page on Facebook that we needed people to sign up. In addition to, about a half hour ago or an hour ago, I sent out another email to our supervisors of our building services, our food nutrition services, and one other group, our substitutes, to try and get those last spots that we have filled, and we're still not filling them.
And lastly, I'd like to call the question.
Say that again.
I'd like to call the question.
She wants to vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I need to wake up. Okay. I can do a roll call vote.
Madam Chair, did it ever get a second? Was there a second?
It was made by you and seconded by Ms. Brown.
Yeah, sorry. It's been a long night. Thank you.
Ms. Wilson, could you or someone repeat the exact wording of the motion that's on the floor and being voted on?
Mr. Hancock, will you do the honors?
Yes, ma'am. As I stated before, in an effort to give as you stated, Madam Chair, the one thing we can give our teachers is the opportunity to be vaccinated. I support bringing phase 2 students back. My motion is to bring phase 2 students back March 22nd.
Okay. Ms. Abel,
Oppose.
Ms. Battle Lockhart, Mrs. Battle Lockhart,
I'm having a brain freeze. What was my first one I'm supposed to be again? I asked this earlier. It's been a long day. We're voting now?
correct.
Okay. And we're voting on what David. Yes, let's go with that.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Hancock,
Yes.
Mr. Lucas,
Yes.
Ms. McGraw,
Oppose.
Ms. Wilson approves. Motion carries.
Student opinion negative.
Student opinion negative.